Digitisation has changed every industry, and architecture is no exception. In particular, how architecture practices communicate has changed fundamentally. I'm joined by Robert Woodburn Park, a seasoned expert in architectural communications, to explore architecture's shift from traditional to digital media in this episode of Architecture Business Club, a weekly podcast for solo and small firm architecture practice owners just like you who want to build a profitable, future-proof architecture business that fits around their life. I'm John Clayton, your host. If you're a small practice leader or sole practitioner in architecture struggling to find clarity or reach your goals, consider working with me. I offer personalised one-to-one support through coaching, consulting and mentoring. This tailored approach helps you navigate your unique path to success. Whether it's growing your practice, working fewer hours or building your team, I've got you covered. Just click the link in the show notes to book a call with me to discuss your options, or email John, that's Jon, at architecturebusinessclub.com for more information. Now let's discuss communications in architecture. Robert Woodburn Park is a seasoned architectural communications expert, providing in-house graphics and marketing leadership for over 25 years for successful studios such as Allies and Morrison, Alison Brooks, PLP Architecture and JTP. He now runs his own consultancy and this year launched Beedier.com, a new media platform for architectural business development information. Robert, welcome to Architecture Business Club.
Thanks for having me, John.
Great to have you here. Well, but before we get stuck into our topic, I'd love to hear a bit more about what you enjoy doing in your free time. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, sure. I mean, as you can imagine, with a new business recently launched, I don't have as much free time as I used to. But yeah, I do like to get out, do a bit of exercise. Swimming is my go-to. I try and get to the pool as often as I can. Get to the galleries. My oldest daughter recently graduated fine arts, so we have a mutual interest in exhibitions, and I try and get to as many as I can. I also graduated fine art when I was her age too. And pub quizzes. Love a weekly pub quiz with our team.
Oh, fantastic! Do you have a team name that you use every week? Can you repeat it on the podcast?
Probably not, actually. Well, the team name is Los Bastardos. Oh. I shouldn't have said that, should I? Yeah. Do you have is this, are there rules about swearing and watershed issues?
I think we'll get away with that one because, the pronunciation and whatnot. But
it's kind of a spaghetti Western a spaghetti Western reference.
I love that. That's fantastic. I haven't been to a pub quiz for ages, but when I was in my 20s, that used to be something that I used to do every single week when I used to live up in the Northwest, and I love a pub quiz. Actually, the last quiz that I did of any kind was last New Year. Some friends did a 1980s themed party, and it was all like sort of 1980s popular culture, like pop trivia. So it was like films and music and all that sort of thing. And I was the youngest person there, and I won it. So I was so made up about that. So if you ever need like a team member for your pub quiz, somebody that knows a bit about sort of films and music, then I'm your man. Okay.
Well, I've got you down. Next time you're in London, if you're here on a Tuesday night, then you know where you're going. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds brilliant. I'll bear it in mind. So, Robert, we're going to talk about communications in architecture so that architects and architecture practices can improve how they communicate what they do. But first, I'd like us to go back in time a little bit. I was wondering if you could take us back to those early days of digital communications. And I'm interested to hear how you convinced some of those more traditional architects to embrace digital strategies like a website, social media, digital press, that sort of thing. Do you have any stories from those earlier days?
The first architectural practice I worked for was Foggo Associates. It's practice set up by Peter Foggo. Who I always thought, and still think, if he sadly he died quite young, he would have potentially been up there with the greats, I think, with Norman Foster. He was, and Richard Rogers, he was of that ilk and era, producing similar buildings, the high-tech style. And one of the first, this was in the late 90s, I started working for them initially as a administrative assistant, filing, and helping them with the letter writing and specifications writing and things like that. And I muscled in on the graphic design because I'd just come out of art school and I happened to have some of the software knowledge. Just persuading them to invest in a copy of the Adobe softwares was one thing because it was quite expensive. And competition came up, actually. They were shortlisted to design the Heron Tower building in London, which was eventually won by Cohn Peterson Fox. But we made a strong pitch, I think. And traditionally, architects, or certainly Foggo Associates at that time in the late 90s, if they're presenting architectural ideas at competition stage, then they would be cutting and pasting. They would be printing out from their old sort of plotters, pasting themselves in the studio, with the glue and Letraset, and then sending it to a reprographics company for reproduction. And typically they would reverse print, they would lay it out, black drawings on a white and reverse it either like a blueprint, or often they like to do it white lines on black. And I said, no, come on. White space, this is what let me do it in InDesign. Or then it was PageMaker, desktop publishing software. And let me come up with an alternative layout for you to your cut and paste. And I did, and they went with it, and from that point on, I was doing all of their marketing materials, brochure work, documentations in desktop publishing, helping them improve the quality of their imagery in Photoshop. And that was really my first experience of using digital media to help architects present themselves. And we also built their first website, which was largely very simple HTML website, but it did the job, in the late 90s. A lot of websites were quite rudimentary then, but, we made it as neat and functional as possible. And it was, quite good for the time.
Things certainly have moved on a bit. That description there that you talked us through about the presentations for the competitions, that sparked a memory actually of when I worked in a practice in the late 1990s, and I hadn't thought about it until you mentioned it, but that thing of where if you're putting a presentation together either for a competition or for a client meeting, something like that, client presentation, that it would be cut and paste, like they'd be literally there with the sort of scissors and paper and glue, sticking it all together, and then it would be sent to the local printers. There was a print shop nearby, and then they would reproduce it, print it out again, and they'd mount it onto a foam board, and then that's what they would use.
Yeah, great that we have all these new tools, but in some ways I feel really bad for the reprographics industry for architects. I'm still in touch with some of those guys that run their companies then, and I do send a bit of work to them every now and again still. Yeah, it was a great industry.
Absolutely. When we think about developing the relationship between images and words, how do you approach integrating storytelling with visuals in architecture?
Yeah, well, I mean, the story of a project is so important, and this, it does require an understanding of the architectural concepts behind a project, both technically and culturally. So I always start with having really good and in-depth conversations with architects about, what is it? Let's try and extract something from this project that has some kind of a narrative, and it could be the physicality of the building. It could be, something in the detail. It could be in the program. or and use of the building. But there's always something interesting about a building, and you have to really drill in to find out what is engaging, what is going to be engaging, because buildings fulfill all kinds of functions. Some of them, quite basic, and some of them actually quite engaging and interesting, and so that's the first step. Some kind of a narrative, and then you choose your images to fit that narrative, and that helps you communicate a project in a way which grabs people's attention. So that could be a concept drawing. It could be a series of exploded axonometrics that divide the drawings, the building into elements, and obviously the photography and of the finished building, or strategically placed renders. But the aim is always to, as you said, match the narrative to the visual content in a way that really helps.
Generally, is that something that happens often, or is that something, the storytelling aspect, is that something that's often overlooked by practices?
I think so, yeah. And often it takes someone else to help them extract that, what is interesting about the building. What's interesting to a building for an architect might be a very sort of minor detail, and or something quite perfunctory or something, but what, trying to extract the story of a building in a way that can help elaborate its meaning is something that architects, I think, often need a little bit of help with. Not all, some architects are brilliant at it, but having someone from the outside just prod them a little to test them, and challenge them on the story of the building that they designed can be helpful, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, I think so. It's just having somebody that can give you a different perspective on things, isn't it? Sometimes when you're really close to something, you just can't see what's staring in front of you.
For sure. And also, architects, some are great writers and some write brilliantly about their work, but, architects are completely focused on the building blocks of what they're trying to achieve through drawing and through CAD and through the various meetings that they're having in consultation with a building. And then sometimes it's a post-rationalization, to step away after it's been built even, or after it's gone through planning stages and you first start to do a bit of marketing for the building. Just to take a step back and have a sort of wider discussion about what the building is and how you can communicate it.
Absolutely. Over the years, communications within architecture have changed significantly over the last few decades. Now we're in the digital age that we live in. So, everything from the way that we present our work, presentations, how we present competition entries, our website, social media. Of all these different changes that have happened in the way that we communicate, what do you think's been the most transformative shift that's affected how architects communicate their work?
Well, certainly in the past, there weren't many avenues, for communicating your work. Architectural marketing, when I first started, really was, largely getting a news section in. The quality of renders were not so great in the 90s. So model photographs, maybe some hand-drawn sketches. But really, it was when the building was complete, you employ a professional photographer, which everyone still does and should do, and try and get it into one of the big magazines. There was half a dozen magazines which we were all clamoring to get our projects into. And that really was architectural marketing. And if you got a front page, then wow, you've really done your job. Architects in those days won their work through networking, and still do. But it was largely networking then, mostly networking. And it involved a lot of extracurricular activities with clients, usually involving alcohol late into the evening. It was a very different type of scene, Now we have just so many more options. The digital explosion, the World Wide Web, there's so much more we can do now, through our social medias, creating our own audience, our own captive audience through social media and through our websites, that offers so much more, in opportunities. And this is why, certainly with the medium to large size practices, architects have their own marketing teams now. People are focusing on their social media solely, people that are focusing on bids, focusing on press liaison. Some of the larger firms have large teams of people. When I was at Allies and Morrison, we had a team of almost 15 people working on graphic design, marketing, and communications for the practice. And I know,
Wow.
The Ajay's and Richard Rogers and the Husses world have more than that.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is, there's literally so many options for people now, and I think it can be difficult to figure out which of those options is the right fit for many small practices. To know, should we be taking time and energy to post on Instagram or LinkedIn, or should we be doing paid ads, or should we be writing a blog or creating videos, or all these many different options that we have, and it can be quite overwhelming, I think, for a lot of small businesses.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. The businesses that don't have the resources of the larger firms, usually it's the directors themselves or trusted senior members of their team doing this work directly. And I tend to think, that when you're a small practice like this, the best way of doing it, if you're doing it yourself, is to do what really interests you, but in a strategic way, because otherwise it becomes a grind. Architects don't have a lot of time. Their projects are intensive. And when you do have those kind of break between, sometimes if you're a smaller practice, there are moments when one project ends and you're suddenly wondering where the next bit of work is coming from. And that's the time where you're thinking about business development. Just be strategic, focused, and local, I think, because you're not going to be able to do everything that the larger firms do. So yeah, what are the types of projects realistically that you're trying to attract? For some smaller firms, the ready income is residential adaptations, extensions, and if you're lucky, a new build house, and refurbishments of workspaces, and if you're lucky enough to be in the public sector, smaller refurbishment work. So, what is your market? How can you best network within that market, and how can you best communicate what you've already done from your portfolio to demonstrate that you'll do a great job for that market? And that's where, being realistic and strategic is with your efforts, because you do have to focus in, because you haven't got all the time in the world. For sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think,
and if you need a bit of help, then budget for that and bring a bit of help in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's quite an important point you mentioned about, if you are a small business and you're looking to DIY this, then if you're able to find something that you enjoy doing, that also is where your target market is hanging out. So in the example of social media, like if you absolutely hate video, like recording videos, like, trying to grow up on a platform like, say, TikTok or something like that is not really going to be the best fit. You're not going to be able to be consistent with that. There's other ways to be seen and communicate what you do, whether that's blog writing or, podcasts. There's other ways. Like, it doesn't always have to be like one particular medium, because the options are almost infinite now with the different varieties of ways we can show up and the different platforms that we have available to us.
Well, certainly that's true. And but sadly, I think, a lot of these, a lot of the socials, getting a website up and constructed, there are some technical barriers. You'd think it would be easy to set up an account on Meta and start, really pushing your socials, but it isn't. There are barriers still that you have to get over. Luckily, there's a lot of online resource to help teach you to do it, but that takes time, and it can be daunting. For some people, really don't have that much interest in the process of the digital communications. They want to win work and design buildings. That's what they train to do.
I mean, you mentioned, Robert, there, if there's something that you need help with, that people should reach out. That's such a good point, because I think with any of these things that we might be struggling with within our business, if we're trying to do everything ourselves, which often is, there's, a lot of sole practitioners out there that are trying to do everything themselves, and those smaller practices, but help is usually closer at hand than you realise. And one of the key things with any spend on marketing, this is an investment, isn't it? It's like, if you are not getting a return on the marketing spend, then like you're doing it wrong, or whoever you're paying to do it for you is doing it wrong. And I like to look at it as encourage people to think of it as a series of experiments. It's like, well, we'll try this thing, we'll do this campaign for a month or two, and if it works, great, we get a bigger return on our investment. If it doesn't, we can try something different. So I think the idea of just like not ever needing to spend any money on marketing your business is a little bit naive. And I think whilst we go through periods of time, and some businesses do manage to survive just on referrals and a bit of networking, but it's not really a sustainable long-term strategy. I feel that getting that mindset shift of actually, I should be investing some either time or money or a combination to be continually marketing my business in some way, so that we don't get those, we avoid the cycle of feast and famine then. But it's really difficult, because like the average Joe small firm architect or architectural technologist is just like, oh, I've got some work, I'm really busy, I'll just get on, 10% of my time and energy is doing the work, and then I don't need to worry about the marketing now. And then it's like, oh, hang on a minute, I've got no work now. Oh, panic. Panic, quick, let's get an ad out somewhere and do some marketing stuff. But I would encourage people to think about it as an investment, that's something that they're continually investing in some way, either with their time or money or a combination, so that they can avoid that situation.
Well, I do feel it is useful, whatever scale of your business and whatever stage of its development, to strategize and budget for that strategy. And as you say, even if that time is coming out of your own time, at least be aware of what you need to put in and the results you're looking for. And there is sort of the direct marketing to get new work in. The B2B Institute, LinkedIn's B2B Institute, recently did a little report and survey. They recommend that every SME or even larger practices should be spending around 55% of their marketing budget on lead generation and around 45% on brand development. This is what they think is the best marketing mix for architects or for any business, really, business to business. And how do those projects come in? They typically come from active pushing public tenders. If you're sort of practice that's working in the public sector, direct networking or repeat commissions from existing clients. Now, or the phone ringing, and that phone doesn't ring unless you're putting that 45% investment into the brand development. The phone rings because you've been noticed, either through your socials or through magazine articles or through your website, or through making a talk at a seminar. All these things, that you're putting yourself out there, communicating what you do. Yeah, these are what help make the phone ring. If you don't do it, then who's going to be calling you? And successful businesses really require a healthy mix of recurring clients and new clients. If you're just focusing on your existing client base, you're it's an incredibly risky strategy. And I've seen practices go down because of that, because people retire, people move on. It's not a very safe strategy, although it is the easiest strategy, to keep getting work from a client who already likes you. But yeah, to build a long-term successful business that's growing, you need to be focusing on how you're communicating your brand. And the easiest and the best way of controlling that is through the digital media strategies at the moment.
So you've mentioned there about both brand building and lead generation. You shared some statistics there as well from that LinkedIn article. How would you recommend that those are balanced? Do you agree with that percentage that was quoted in the study on LinkedIn in terms of how the budget is balanced? Do you have any other thoughts on how we should be, different sizes of practices should be balancing their brand building and lead generation efforts?
Well, I think, it really is a matter of what each practice's needs, concerns, what their current, marketing conditions are, and who they're currently working with. I think a practice, for instance, usually when I start working with a new client, we have these initial conversations. What do you want to achieve? What's your current body of work? What sectors are you working on? What's your current client base? How are you worried about the future, or why am I here? What do you want to achieve? And often it's, we are worried. We've got a good client base, but we're worried about what happens in the future. Or we're a small practice and we've got projects going on at the moment, but what's next in the pipeline? How can we create that pipeline? So it very much depends on the situation of the studio. Everyone is in a different place, I should say. And there might be some studios that are very good at lead generation because their directors are proactive. They're usually architecture companies that are successful quickly have very proactive extrovert directors that are at the networking events, talking to the right people, enjoy putting themselves out there. Usually, they don't need much help in that respect, but they may need a little bit of help with making sure their brand development is moving at the same pace as their networking activities. Making sure that they have high quality socials, high quality content on their webs, they're winning awards, and they're being talked about in the press. The two really have to go hand in hand. As for the various percentages, it really differs, I think, from studio to studio.
I understand. So if they have clarity on what the goals are, what they're looking to achieve from a strategic point of view, that can help inform how that balance sits between brand building and lead generation. Remember, don't forget to download the Architecture Business Blueprint, the step-by-step formula to freedom for architects, architectural technologists and architectural designers. You can grab the blueprint without any charge at architecturebusinessclub.com/blueprint. And if you're enjoying this episode, then please leave a 5-star review or rating wherever you listen to podcasts. Now back to the show.
Sure. Yeah. And in some ways, brand building is the easiest part of the equation because, there are a number of avenues to pursue. If you're aware of what the avenues are, and you're able to produce good content, then in some ways it's easier to push that. Lead generation does require more of an effort, and a little bit of luck.
Absolutely. Having marketing knowledge and the right data is obviously very important with any of this stuff. but it can be quite time consuming, especially for smaller practices. How can those smaller firms compete with larger companies that perhaps have more resources for research and marketing investment?
Well, I think the simple answer is you can't compete with them because they have full-time people working on research, and they have all this information to their hands. They're sector-based information. They developed a CRM, customer relationship management system that helps monitor their strategic communications with potential clients and existing clients. They have all this on hand. So I think a smaller practice has to focus. You don't have that resource, and there's no point trying to compete. But what you can do is focus on sector, localize your networking strategies, even localize your communication strategies, and pick off areas of business development interest that you realistically feel you're capable of pursuing. I think a lot of time and effort is spent pushing on projects and sectors that you have a low chance of achieving results. And we all are inspired, by people like Zaha Hadid, who did nothing but architectural competitions throughout the 80s, with very little results, and then suddenly, boom, she was the next hot thing, and the rest is history. We are, Richard Rogers back in the 70s, won the contract for the Pompidou Center as a young architect, pitching, in an open competition. These kind of myth-making examples are great for inspiration, but incredibly hard to replicate these days. So you do have to be realistic, and if you've got a track record of designing housing, perhaps at another studio, if you had a slightly more senior role in another studio where we're leading projects, then that's got to be the sector you're focusing on. Likewise, if you're building a great track record of domestic work, or a great track record of work community-based projects, there's a lot of new up-and-coming practices are. There's not a lot of money in it in the UK at the moment, but there's not many opportunities, but there are opportunities for practices that really want to drill into that and become great at it, which requires higher levels of networking than perhaps some other projects do, and collaboration. So it's about knowing what you're comfortable at, what your experience is, and then really focusing on your networking opportunities and your message.
That makes sense. Robert, you've recently launched Beedier. Can you tell us more about what Beedier is, what it offers, and how you envision it making an impact in the industry?
Well, I mean, the idea for Beedier came from, just a discussion really that we just had, that the larger practices have all these resources. They know what the opportunities are because they've spent time, finding out and tracking things, What I wanted to do with Beedier in a nutshell was do all this research and offer it to everyone else. Say, for instance, the website tracks public tenders. Not every studio is able to pitch public tenders in the UK, but it's hard because it's hard. But we also track open design competitions internationally. Sometimes there's a chance of getting on a shortlist for these and increasing your status and brand, if not winning the competition. And we also track awards. There's over 200 potential awards in the UK for architects, for various categories. I tend to think that, any project of any scale of reasonable quality has a good chance of winning an award. You just need to find the right awards. It may not win an RIBA award, but there'll be something, and so, we track, as many awards that we can find and tell you what they are, tell you what you need to submit for it, tell you what the costs are, and when the deadlines are. And, we also research events, networking events, cultural events. A lot of architects tell me, I want to go and network, but I don't know where to go. What should I do? What do I do when I get there? So we do that as well. We publish events, and we write up stories. We interview people who are experienced in architectural marketing and business development, or have an interesting story or case study, and we do other research, in relation to business development and marketing for architects, including the social media zeitgeist. One of the things we do with the website, which is one of our sort of key, innovations, I think, is we're tracking the social media performance of every architect in the UK and Ireland at the moment, and we're reporting back quarterly on whose socials are growing. That's why we call it the zeitgeist. Which young practices, for instance, are really pushing their socials really hard and getting a lot of attention. What can we learn from that? There's a one-man practice in South Wales called Initiate Architecture, and they're really high on the list. And it's only because their director is his posting is really inspirational, and he's built up a organic following simply by being very open in the way he communicates his business, and takes people with him. I've set up this new company. This is what I've learnt. Here you go. And he's got a quite a young following of students and younger architects through that, and is now beginning to convert that into project work as people have noticed his socials. So these things are interesting, I think. Who is working their socials well? What can we learn from that? And what is to be gained from working your socials well? Some architects complain to me, that what's the point of having a lot of people following you? It doesn't always convert into direct business. And that's true. But, as I said, that phone isn't going to ring unless you do it. And if you do it well, it's more likely to ring. Social media zeitgeist is really there for people to track their own performance against their competitors. If you have an interest in your social succeeding, then let's measure that. One of the things about architectural marketing and communications is almost everything is measurable. How many visitors are you getting to your website? Check the analytics. How many are new visitors? Where are they visiting from? How many new followers do you have? How many awards are you winning? What's the turnaround on your awards? What's the turnaround on your bidding? It's all measurable, and we wanted to offer another way of measuring social media performance. Really, I think for the first, I don't know of anyone else sort of creating this comparable measure across the whole industry before. So yeah, that's one of the key things we do with Beedier.
I love it. It's a fantastic resource, and people should definitely go and check it out. Beedier.com. And actually, I'm aware the Initiate Architecture that you mentioned, Ross Hartland. Yeah, Ross. I'm aware of his account. He's doing an amazing job. So well done, Ross. If you happen to be listening, and if you'd like to be a guest on the show, you'd be very welcome, because we'd all love to hear more about that story.
Yeah, he would be great, inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely. Robert, what's the main thing that you'd like everyone to take away from the conversation today?
I think, there are four main elements to business development, successful architectural business development. One is, and it starts with strategy. What is your strategy? Be clear about that and honest with yourself about it. Then it's research. It's very difficult to do any kind of successful business development without researching. Now, you can research forever, so be focused. So that's the third element. Be focused in what you're trying to achieve. and fourthly, communicate well. You have to make the most of what you've got, and what you've got is your project work. And if you're not communicating it as successfully as it possibly could be, you're minimizing your potential, I think. So you have to take all of those four things seriously, really, or be very lucky.
That's great advice. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, there's a missed opportunity there if people aren't doing this right. So, that's really helpful. Robert, is there anything else that you wanted to add about the topic that we haven't already covered?
I wanted to talk to you about music playlists, John. You might have noticed on the Beedier website, we publish a music playlist as a bit of fun. I kind of want the website to be a place, where people go, they get a lot of hard information, but it also feels like a place where, we also publish everyone's podcasts. We update that on a weekly basis. So including yours, there's 30 odd podcasts and counting out there in the UK. And where, it's great to be able to have somewhere to go where you can, plug in, listen to someone's opinions on architecture, on marketing or theory or anything, or planning, anything to do with the job that you do, and have a little listen while you're pumping CAD or something. And we offer a little playlist there. And the playlist is loosely focused on genres of music which are around place and time, to link it to the theme. And you said you were going to do a playlist for us, John.
I did. I haven't done it yet, I'm afraid. So I will make a note of that now to remind me to put something together.
So far, they're genre playlists, 50 tracks, and go mad.
Brilliant. I will definitely put something together. I have a few playlists already that might be workable for it. I wanted to ask you one other thing. It's a question about travel. I like to ask this of all of the guests. I love to travel, discover new places. I know that you are a huge fan of travel as well. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering if you could tell me about one of your favourite places and what you love about it. This could be near or far. Does anywhere spring to mind?
I mean, it would have to be far, really. I've done a lot of traveling. I tend to take my laptop and do a bit of work while I'm traveling too. So I spent most of last year in South America, and there are so many great places there, hang out by the beach, doing work during the day, and then, taking a swim in waters that hopefully aren't too shark infested. But I think I also love Alaska. But I think, there's something about Alaska which is amazing, as the wilderness and the influence of the native cultures still in Alaska. But I think if I was to pinpoint one place in the world that I keep going back to, it for various reasons, it's Santa Barbara in California. Mm-hmm. Simply because I love the urbanism of the place. Whenever I'm describing Santa Barbara, the weather is amazing. That's always a draw. By the sea, great beach. But there's something interesting about the urbanism of Santa Barbara in the sense that you have the beach, then you have State Street that goes from the beach, and then crossing over State Street is the 101 freeway, which kind of separates the rest of the town from the beach quite brutally, really. The only way of accessing the beach is through the underpass under the State 101 flyover, which is being designed quite nicely. But I just love the simplicity of that urbanism. Everything in Santa Barbara is on State Street. You can all, from the beach, the end of the pier, which is at the end of State Street, all the way up State Street, and you've seen Santa Barbara, really. Well, obviously you haven't seen all of it, but anything that matters, I think. The galleries, the restaurants, the bars, the places to buy all kinds of interesting stuff, and the people that are hanging out in Santa Barbara. It's known as a city where the rich and famous live, but they tend to live in the hills. You don't see many of them hanging out on State Street. It's a real mix of people, I feel, So
I'd love to visit one day.
Santa Barbara regularly.
Yeah, Santa Barbara. I've heard good things about it, but I've never been to California, so it's still on my bucket list of places to go and visit. So maybe one day, hopefully, Robert.
You'll get there, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know who to ask for some tips before I go.
Oh, yeah.
If you've been there a few times before, so I'll drop you a message about that if and when I ever do get to California. Robert, it's been a pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and expertise. Can you just remind everybody the best place to connect with you if they'd like to connect with you online somewhere? Where's the best place to do that?
Oh, well, visit the Beedier website, beedier.com. We have various ways of contacting me from there. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, look, thanks again.
Brilliant. Nice to speak to you, John. And good luck with your podcast. It's a great resource. It really is. I'll keep watching.
Oh, thanks, Robert. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Next time, I'll be chatting about London Build 2024, the UK's leading and largest construction show, where I am one of the event speakers. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Architecture Business Club. If you liked this episode, think other people might enjoy it, or just want to show your support for the show, then please leave a glowing 5-star review or rating wherever you listen to podcasts. It would mean so much to me and makes it easier for new listeners to discover the show. And if you haven't already done so, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss another episode. If you want to connect with me, you can do that on most social media platforms. Just search for @Mr. John Clayton. The best place to connect with me online, though, is on LinkedIn. You can find a link to my profile in the show notes. Remember, running your architecture business doesn't have to be hard, and you don't need to do it alone. This is Architecture Business Club.